maximize every opportunity so that you can become legendary.
What adjustments can you make right now to make yourself 1%
Your
better?
only goal is to be the best version of you.
Laura, welcome to the Becoming Legendary podcast. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Lovely, lovely. Thanks for asking. I love that question. It's so often that I don't get asked that question when in the jump off. So I'm like giddy.
Oh, I think that should be I think we should reciprocate. I'm doing well. How are you? And I mean it.
Yeah, heck yeah. I'm lovely. I'm so happy to get the opportunity to meet you. So this is the first time we've ever spoken. And I know
Yes.
you and Brian have a nice history, but for me and for anybody listening who isn't familiar with you, can you give us the quick backstory?
Yes. So I am Laura McKinzie. I am based out of Phoenix, Arizona, born and raised here. And I've been teaching yoga for almost 20 years now in Arizona. And for the last 10 of those years, I've been training yoga teachers at Spirit of Yoga, which is a part of Southwest Institute of Healing Arts, which is a holistic college here in Tempe, Arizona. So very close to ASU, for those of you who might be familiar with our university. And that's how I met Brian. He was a part of my 200-hour program. I've been the director of the 200-hour program there, and I am the lead instructor for the 200-hour program. I teach fast track during the day, is what we call it. We come together Monday through Thursday for 3 hours a day for the 200-hour training. And beyond that, I'm a wife and a mom of 3 kids, and I just became a grandma. I have my oldest had a baby, so life is good. Yeah, I'm super grateful. And
I mean, if you were gonna pause on one word or one like end of the sentence, I'm super grateful is a pretty good way to pause, isn't it, Brian?
Yeah, exactly right.
Hi. It auto mute. Isn't that a wonderful Zoom feature where when you get kicked off the internet, it puts you back on mute for some reason?
because it doesn't want you to come back and be all like fiery and saying things you don't want recorded. Right?
We were just going down a rabbit hole, Laura. I'm glad you came on when you did.
I know. So my true confession is I live in we moved in June. We live in a really small house. And so I'm like hiding out in the space above the garage. And so that you won't hear my family in the main home. And so I don't know if I have such good I might have to go to my phone or something if it keeps cutting us off.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Now.
Okay.
So go ahead, Brian.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, this is all I wanted to say. There was like a perfect component to how you froze out, which was the very last thing you said was, I am so grateful. And it just like froze right after that. It was like, well, that was just perfect.
The end. I think we're done here. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. That truly is that's it. I am so grateful. The end. I don't know if there's a lot else to say.
That's it.
Yeah.
We've got what we wanted. We're done.
Yeah.
I think
but hey, I want to.
Yeah. Nice encapsulation.
Yes. So I was just doing some background about you, Miss Laura, to Patrick. And so Patrick used to own Vitality, or owned Vitality, still owns it, I suppose, if you will. Vitality is the studio down in Chandler, Arizona, where they had the vibration plates. Are you still on, Laura? Yeah. Okay. There you are. Perfect. So I was fortunate enough to teach for him for a little while. The COVID happened. He had to shut down his studio. So hence he moved back up to Colorado. But I was going back and forth with just like playing numbers with myself. How many students have you guided through the yoga teacher training track? I estimated 1,000, but is that lowballing it?
Maybe. Yeah, it's been a lot because I've always taught fast track during the day. And now I have like the best schedule. I teach only 2 fast tracks now per year, and it gives me a chance to travel. I'm going to India in January again. And I have my summers off. And so it's pretty much the best schedule. But for a long time, I was teaching back-to-back YTT trainings. And so there were a lot of students that moved through. And then for 4 years of that, I taught fast track during the day, and I taught Tuesday, Thursday night YTT. Wow. So there was a whole nother YTT I was managing at the same time as the daytime one. So 1,000 might be lowballing it.
I think it is for sure.
Yeah.
You know, this is going to lead into my first question. How the heck do you do it? because I, you know, to be completely honest, after I graduated, one of my missions, right, was to help assist first, and then to move on along the line, and to eventually guide students through the YTT program, like yourself. And I realized early on that path necessarily just wasn't for me. So I need to find out a little bit about what makes that experience so compelling for you to be a part of, right? And then not only that, but then the way that you deal with each and every student, it's as if they're the only student that exists in the world, right? So that's what I felt. We had a big class. It was like maybe 40 students or something. And every time you were speaking, it was as if you were talking to me only, you know? So how does Laura find space to hold space for so many other people?
Wow. Well, that's like a huge compliment. That could bring me to tears, because I think that's truly my joy. I want that to be a felt sense, because it's why I show up every day. I want people to feel seen as an individual, as their own beautiful, unique self. I want them to feel loved and appreciated. And really how I do it is because I get all of that back. That's so sustaining. And I don't want it to sound cliche, and it's not that I don't have my own rough days or where I feel sort of energetically spent, but then my job is to go fill up. Not just teaching yoga, but embodying the practice is really the sustainer for me. It's embodying it in every aspect. And that's through my time with my family, through driving on the road, through the line at the grocery store. It's like everything I teach in the classroom is what I've lived and continue to live on a daily basis. And so I really just want to support people, let them know how truly loved they are in the world in a bigger way. And that just fills me up, truly fills me up. It just brings me so much joy.
It's magical. You're a magical person. I've spent a lot of time one-on-one with you. And I was telling Patrick that I have my spiritual teachers, I have my guides, I have the people that I fall back on, the books that I read, et cetera, et cetera. But you as a person you're like a pure mirror. And, in the time of my life that I was going through yoga teacher training, I needed to be reminded just what you brought up, like that I am loved, that I am valued, that I am seen. And so when I had those one-on-one conversations with you, aside from class, it was as if I was looking into my own self in a weird way. And that's what I mean by a mirror, like in my soul. And it wasn't as if you were saying anything that was out of the ordinary or sort of away from my calling. You were just, you kept reminding me of my own self. And so do you look at yourself as a mirror? Do you feel that in conversations? Because I know that I certainly felt it, and I'm not the only person that has felt that either.
I truly, I think we all are. I think that we all have our own like intuitive gifts and what we feel and experience through other people. But, this is also kind of like the human experience, right? Like, I don't think it would be as pure or as I don't think it would land as much if I hadn't, like, if I don't continuously do my own work, right? Like, so I think what makes it a mirror is the relatability, is it's like, I get you, you know, I'm not just sitting here on high, you know, I don't have my yoga robes on and I'm like, you know, life is magical all the time. You know, I recognize the struggle and the challenges of our human existence, you know, and so what I really like to do is just tether people back to the divinity that they truly are, so that they can navigate the human experience from a place that's landed and supported. And so if I can be a little bit of an anchor point to that, it's really only because I know what it feels like to be untethered, to be unanchored to something greater, and also what it feels like to be home in that. So I think that's the commonality or the connection in those moments.
It's a great answer. The only person that's wearing a yogic robe here is Patrick.
And there's no judgment. Robe it up.
I just had to bring up
style, or you know, yoga meditation guru in the Himalaya style. Either way.
That's it. I had to bring that up, Patrick. For those who are listening and not watching, he's got a beautiful white vegan, I don't know, looks silk robe on. I don't know what it is, but it's a vibe, and I love it.
It's the vibe.
Man, the picture that you were drawing for people is fun.
It's probably inaccurate.
So Laura, I want to go back to something that you kind of touched around. And one of the things that you mentioned is the authentic representation in the way you feel and the way you communicate. And that is a really interesting place in the yogic experience. And I think from a young teacher's perspective, I think one of the biggest mistakes early on in teaching careers in the yoga world is this, like, teaching from a place of non-authenticity, right? Like, here's a quote that I read on Instagram 5 minutes before the class, and I'm gonna like tell you this and try to fit it in a non-themed class. It just, like, I'm interjecting this thing through someone. Was there a time in your experience when that was part of the practice or part of the teaching practice? And do you know how you attached yourself to an authentic representation of the way you kind of channel through teaching?
Yeah, I think that we all have to go through that. I remember my days as a young, early, teacher, and I was just winging it. I would literally pray, to whomever, like, please don't let me totally screw this thing up. Like, don't let me be this epic failure. Because at that point, even in my teachings, after having gone through, I went through a 500-hour training, a year-long 500-hour training. And the small voice Laura was still really, really loud. And I feel like she was driving the car. And so there was thankfully the internal voice that said, just keep teaching, just keep teaching, just keep teaching. And I feel like it's through living this life where we seem to connect to everything that we're not, that brings us back to our truth or what we truly are. And thankfully through the teaching of yoga, even when it was like, I'm just going to throw out a breath technique or a quote and I'm just going to trust, or fingers crossed it works, I was better able to connect to everything I am. And so I'm really light with my teachers. And I tell them all the time, like, say yes to teaching, say yes to every teaching, because it kind of works itself out. I believe in a lot of the like minutia and a lot of the crap that, that we put out there, but don't really know how to embody yet. And then we find our way through it. And it takes time. It just takes time because it's a journey, which we all know and we hear, and there's lots of quotes on that as well, but it's a journey. But what makes me sad is when people shut it down, when they know inside, like, this isn't authentic, so I'm just not going to teach. It's like, no, just keep teaching and it works itself out as you go.
Mm-hmm.
And it teaches us a lot about ourselves. Teaching teaches us a lot about ourselves. So it's through the process of teaching that what's revealed is the true self in teaching.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to touch really quickly, Brian, I'll turn this to you, but this idea of saying yes for teaching, so yes to teaching. There's a practicality within that statement as well, right? Like, it's not just the necessity to teach in which you will find yourself, but there is also the reality that when an opportunity to teach presents itself, that is literally your doorway into showing who you are. And the thing that I've realized in teaching for someone else is that if there's a sub opportunity, that is just an opportunity as an advertisement for yourself, right? Like, anytime as a teacher, you are leaving the door open for someone to come and fill your space, that's an opportunity for someone to come in and grab your students and make them their students, number one. And anytime you have the opportunity to come in and teach, that is an opportunity to go into someone else's room and connect with those students and make those students part of your student collective. And I don't think I ever really understood that until I was teaching in another studio space. And that is the most underutilized tool in the teaching industry, like in the yoga teaching industry. If you are struggling to find students, find your way into a class to sub and connect with those students, and you all of a sudden have them.
Subbing classes got me more jobs than ever being invited into a studio setting.
100%.
It was all through subbing. And I still get it's interesting to me when I put out still a request for sub I teach one studio class now, and it's really a piggyback for Fast Track so that they can come in and see me teach a full class, but I need a sub sometimes. And it's like crickets. I can't get it. I'm like, really? Like, this is your way in, friends. Like, come on, sub these classes. And beyond everything that you said so beautifully, which I totally agree with and support, it challenges us as teachers to go in and teach someone else's class who, those students love that teacher, right? That challenges us as teachers, not to be like the teacher that's usually teaching the class, but to be authentically us. Well, who am I? How can I express myself? How can I shine in this space? And by the way, I might not even know for sure what the teacher usually teaches here, but what can I authentically share in this moment? And it's a powerful way to challenge ourselves as teachers.
Yeah.
For sure. There's also for me in my teaching journey, I too now, Laura, only teach one studio class a week. I teach strength and stability at Spirit of Yoga, which I've been teaching now for 3 or 4 years now. And to be quite frank, I was teaching 10 to 15 classes a week for a couple of years straight. And I got burnt out big time. I found that they're just going through the motions, but on the growth up to those 10 or 15 classes a week, I don't want to call like a level, but I would get to a certain place, and then I would start to question myself. I would start to think about whether or not I was showing up in an authentic way. And then I would go back to my roots. I would go back to some of the Laura quotes. I would go back to some of my initial trainings. I would revisit those, and then I would up level onto the next level. And then I found myself reaching a ceiling, and then I'd have to go back and revisit all the stuff that kind of made me what I was up until that point. So the question really becomes, in your own practice, in your own teaching, when you're in front of the students, is there still that dual dialogue going back and forth in your own brain, as if, because for me, I know that it's, and what I mean by the dual dialogue is this authentic? Is this landing? Is this connecting? Or are you so experienced now that it just flows? Because for me, there's days that it flows, and there's days that I'm in my head. And I think when I can find, like, I've stopped like planning a script, I've stopped writing everything out that I used to do for a good solid year, and it just comes out wherever it's supposed to come out. So yeah, does that feel the same for you as you move through your teaching career, or is there still that back and forth in your own brain?
Teaching, I mean, I wouldn't say it's because I'm experienced. I just think I'm a little more chill about it now. I've spent a decade and a half, I would easily say, judging myself, worried that it wasn't enough, am I being authentic? What can I, and I take tons of trainings, lots of workshops. I like to continue to fill myself up so that I can share in a powerful way, hopefully. But now when I teach a class, it's very enjoyable because there is such a level of trust that everyone in here is getting something that they need. I really believe that they wouldn't be in that space and I wouldn't be in that space if we weren't supposed to be there together in that moment, connected. So whatever comes through, comes through. And are there some times after I teach where I'm like, I don't know if that was so good. Yeah, but I give that to the yoga too. I'm like, I just give that to the yoga. And then I'm like, oh my God, did everyone feel that? That was the most epic class ever. I'm like, that was so amazing. And I'm like, give that to the yoga too. You can't hold on to that. That's the trick, because then you've set this level of expectation within yourself. Like, I've got to always meet that. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think that you are just constantly transmitting something greater than, the small self when we trust, when we let go and just let it flow. It sounds so silly when I say it like that. I do like a good rhyme, but that to me is the idea. So no, the studio classes aren't the stressor. When I'm training teachers, that flows really well. Afterwards, I step back and really look at it, because that, not that that's any more important than a studio class, but, they're in there. I take that responsibility really seriously to be some type of vessel who's going to be sharing these ancient teachings in a way that's engaging and digestible. And that shifts depending on the dynamic of the space, the dynamic of the students in it. That's a whole different piece than teaching a studio class.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As I've grown through lessening the amount of the classes that I teach, for me, one of the funnest things is to see the look on the students' faces or in their bodies of like, I'm back here and I've revisited myself. Like, I've reconnected to myself. So teaching so many classes was almost numbing that for me. I wasn't allowed to feel that expression. So as much as I'm giving, as much as you're giving when you're teaching, you're also receiving, right? There's those subliminal messages, there's those non-verbal messages that are always coming into you. And that's one of the things that I enjoy most about speaking to you or speaking to any yoga teacher, really, is the fact that they're showing up in a way that feels really, really authentic, and that's beautiful to see. So thank you for being so authentic.
Well, thank you. And look, teaching 15 classes of anything is a lot. I mean, that's an energetic, that can be a lot of depletion where it's like, I can never catch up. I can never recharge enough to feel like I can share from a place of authenticity, or just from a place where I don't feel exhausted doing it.
Exactly right. It became a point. I was also managing the yoga teachers too, which is something that is, it sheds interesting to say the least. It sheds a light on why I think a lot of yoga teachers are appreciated but not loved. And I know that maybe rings a bell to you, Patrick, because we're researching and planning on.
I think loved but not appreciated is actually the way I would phrase it.
Okay, interesting. That's even better. We've got more of a topic than to talk about. So yeah, whatever way you want to look at it, it's there's something there to think about deeper for sure.
Definitely.
So I'm interested
in what you guys are talking about.
So let's touch on it really quick. I think that there's a reality that financially supporting yourself within the yogic world is remarkably difficult. And I think there's also a reality that the person that you see at the grocery store that like lights you up, your yoga teacher, right? Like that person also lives a real life, and that's why they're at the grocery store. And I think it's easy for students to forget that most yoga teachers are struggling financially for sure, but almost inherently are struggling financially. And also they're like, you may be in a yoga class one day where someone just had a horrific breakup 3 hours before, and yet they are there to shine a light towards you. And the amount of taxation on that energetic exchange that they are offering you, I think is really easy to underappreciate. It's really easy to underappreciate someone who shows up every single day and who lights up your world. And so much so that when you see them out in public, it is like, my yoga teacher's here. And that is a real thing that happens.
Oh, yeah. Well, they, students will put you on a pedestal, and they really do believe that, I don't know what they believe, but it definitely feels like they have this feeling that we are beyond the struggles of the day to day. And that it was through the practice of yoga that we now walk around the world not suffering, right? In any way, financially, emotionally, mentally, physically, that there's this idea that yoga teachers are beyond that. And we all know that is absolutely not true. And it is through the struggle and through our own suffering that we then can use the power of the teachings of yoga to help support somebody else who's going through the same thing. And what is comforting as a yoga teacher is that there's so many other yoga teachers who get that. I don't know that the students will ever get that. I don't know that they care to. I think that we have a community of yoga teachers who get it. And that's who we need to lean into in those times where we feel depleted and struggling. And how do we keep this going? Should I continue to teach? I think leaning into other yoga teachers and really having a supportive community of yoga teachers is key, because I don't think it's in the makeup of the students to get it in a big way. I think they're going to continue to, like, what do you buy at the grocery store? Is that beer? That's weird. I thought you only bought mung beans. It's just, they have this idea, and I'm very relaxed with the fact that they have that idea. And I'm 100% okay that that's not my reality. That's not my truth. I know what it is to navigate the challenges of life. I know what it is to have a really terrible experience and then show up and teach anyway.
Yeah. So much.
But that's why we need each other.
So I want to piggyback and devil's advocate the collective conversation that you guys just kind of bounce back and forth. Because I don't think anything within the experience is inherent. So there were times where I was teaching 20 plus 24 classes a week. And they came after like a really impactful, they didn't come after a really impactful thing. They came after a breakup where my partner and I split up. And I was left from being kind of like this background force within my yoga studio to being the face of the yoga studio. And I was pushed into being forced to teach and being forced to be really in a place that was interesting, because I was there for a group of students who were grieving the fact that my relationship had ended. And to be like in that position changed the way I thought about myself. It changed the way I thought about the yoga studio, and it changed my relationship with the community into what I really feel today is just like this family of people that I love. And teaching that often, it didn't take away my like teaching skill set. It made teaching, it opened these doors of what I could do in a class to a point that I cannot imagine ever possibly getting to unless I was teaching that often. It was just like the physical component was just background, and everything else that I could do was like, that's how I use my energy. Like the class taught itself, and I used my energy to like nurture and take care of and make the energetic experience for the students happen. And I don't think I could get there without teaching that many classes a week, because where I have changed my schedule, it's just not the same. And I also think, you know, during that time, as crazy as it was, that became like the most graceful period of my life, where there was nothing that could go wrong that would faze me in any way. And that did come from teaching yoga, right? Like it was yoga that brought me into this space where nothing mattered. It was like, oh, that's a problem. We'll just solve it. Like, it doesn't matter what comes up. We'll solve whatever comes up. Everything is handleable. So I think that your yoga teacher may very well be this like immaculate being. And if that is the case, it's freaking amazing. Like, take yoga with that yoga teacher, because that is amazing. But it is also just as possible that your yoga teacher just had a fight with their mom, and now they're walking in and they somehow have to like deal with all the turmoil and all of that like inner workings that you do, and put a smile on their face and like show you the love that you showed up to class to receive. So I don't think it's inherent that it's like your teacher may be a monk. It's possible your teacher's a monk. It's also possible your teacher's really struggling. And it's also possible as a teacher to teach every single hour of your active being and be charged and thrilled and in love with life.
100%. I think each person's experience is individual.
For sure.
I know a lot of teachers. I've been that teacher who taught 15, 20 classes a week. I might only teach one now, but I've been there. I've taught the 15, 20 classes a week. I will say for myself, it was sustainable to a point. And that's probably not true either. It just got to a point where I felt like I was making choices that were going to work best for my whole life rather than just this one sort of avenue. Yeah. But I agree with you. I think, but every person's experience is going to be different. You know, my experience to Brian's, to yours, Patrick, each one of us is going to have a different experience, and it's all valuable. It's all, you know, real. It's all something that we've navigated. And I will say it's all empowering for other teachers as well as students to hear your story, to know your story, for you to share it it creates a bond. Like you said, you're not just there to teach, you're also there receiving. You're getting back so much of their love and support as you're navigating the challenges of life as well. So I think it's really beautiful, but each person, each teacher has to find their way through that. My experience is not going to be yours. It's not going to be Brian's. It's not going to be the 1,000, you know, teachers I've trained. Like what is your experience and what is sustainable for you?
Yeah. And what's right for you? It's Patrick and I met when his ex-partner and him were together, and Vitality was thriving as with Patrick in the background, and then life happened, and I came back around. Patrick and I reconnected when the partnership had no longer broken up, and now I looked at him and I was like, who is this guy? Like he felt so different, both from you know, mental, spiritually, emotionally. And so I appreciate that story so much, Patrick. It provides a lot of insight into you, into how, gosh, because when I met you then for that second time, I think you invited me to the studio. I forget exactly how it went down, but it was like this. it was a similar feeling I received from you, Laura, that, you know, I guess I'm still trying to cultivate. And it's like, it's that pure mirror that shows up. Patrick, I look at him as a mirror as well. And it's always great to share those war stories, if you will, about teaching, but also share insight on how to up level and how to improve and how to allow the students to be that constant force of love, you know, that is moving through us. So I just want to say thanks, Patrick, and thanks, Laura, for that little comment. I appreciate you both. That was really cool.
Appreciate you. Laura, you mentioned so flip out of us and go into a deeper yogic conversation. You mentioned you're going back to India. I'm curious how you interact with the westernization of yoga. How does that feel within the authenticity of your yogic experience?
In India or in the US? Just the US westernizing?
Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting question, right? Because the reality is we went east, we brought yoga west, and now Western yoga is working its way back to back east, back to India. And that is just part of the fact that America has this current inherent pull, right, where we can really change the way anything happens. We take things and we make them happen. And now India is taking a westernized version of yogic exercise and making that part of their culture. But I'm just curious in general. You can answer that however it feels right.
For me personally, it's important that I honor yoga's roots to my understanding. I was very fortunate to have yoga teachers that have been connected to what I see as traditional yoga, as well as lineages of yoga, and more than just asana. You know, it's definitely, you know, an 8-limbed practice. But even beyond the 8 limbs, I think it's just, for me, connecting students back to the knowing of the true self, using all the tools of yoga. If that's going to be through asana, okay, then we can use it as asana. If it's going to be through meditation, pranayama, concentration, right? You know, focusing on one thing to the exclusion of everything else. It's using all of the tools. It's more of a tantric practice. It's using all of life as a way to steer us back to the knowing of wholeness, the knowing of our true self. And so for me, you know, going back to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and, you know, the Bhagavad Gita, but the ancient texts, and really studying those, as well as asana. You know, in the West, we know that there's more of an attraction to the practice of yoga through asana. I will say, I think a lot of students are looking for more, but it's usually asana that's the gateway. And so being able to really create a class that speaks to them physically, but really gets them into sensation and energy, which is the guidepost back to the knowing of the true self. So all of it has a purpose. I'm just not interested in teaching one aspect of it, postures. So I tell my students, if you're, you know, anyone can teach postures. I mean, that's an exercise class. But how can we teach yoga with asana? And what does that mean to you? And you know, I think it's important for us to look at that, especially in the West, so that we're not appropriating an ancient practice, but rather honoring it as much as we can.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. You mentioned lineages, and one of the lineages that you've studied underneath is Kamini Desai.
Yes.
And specifically Yoga Nidra. And Patrick hosted a retreat that I was lucky enough to be a part of planning and teaching. And a main staple point in that retreat was Yoga Nidra. I think we did a couple of them, right, Patrick? I think at least. Yeah. And Patrick's look on his face He goes, I'm not sure what exactly happened there, but it is pure magic, pure magic, that Yoga Nidra. So I want to hear it from your voice, because I did my best to explain it, but you're very eloquent and articulate in the way that you explain the practice of Yoga Nidra. And it's been such an impactful practice in my life. And it's such a simple practice. You have to lay down and receive. That's it. I listened to yours yesterday that you sent me a long time ago. It was called Centered, where you take us through the 7 energy centers. And it's one of my main go-tos whenever I'm feeling a little twirly, if you will. But I don't want to take up any more time. I want to hear it from out of your mouth. What is the practice of Yoga Nidra?
Well, I mean, deep restoration, but Yoga Nidra is really leading us towards the knowing of the true self. It's allowing us to rest in our ocean-like nature, the unchanging aspect of self, that which was here before this body and mind, and that which will be here after this body and mind. And especially I Am Yoga Nidra. Some Yoga Nidra programs will kind of lead you to the end of the diving board, but never really let you know how to jump off and rest as the true self. And I Am Yoga Nidra is all geared towards that aspect. Our bodies are already biologically programmed to, rest, but unfortunately, because we're such a sympathetic dominant society, we don't even know how to do that anymore. And Yoga Nidra really reteaches the body how to move through the brainwave states and rest in the deepest aspect of self in order then to come back to the world of form and navigate life from that place. That's the whole thing. It's not that you're not going to come back into form and have bills to pay and traffic to deal with and relationships, but it gives you the capacity to navigate that with a little more ease, with a little more gentleness with yourself as well as the world around you. So that's what I would say. What would you say, Brian?
You're going to throw it back on me. Perfect. It allows me to come from a place of right action than always having to react to people, places, and things in my life. That's a direct quote from you. I use it all the time. But that's really what it means for me. It's a sleep-based guided meditation that brings you down through the different brain wave states and allows you, again, to rest in your own true nature. It's something that I've introduced it to my family members, to my friends, to Patrick, to everybody. And it's always the overwhelming feedback or response is, where the heck did you learn this thing from? And how do I learn it? I want more of this. So then it becomes one of my favorite gifts that I can give to somebody, whether it's Christmas or their birthday, is a personally recorded Yoga Nidra session. And I think that is such a beautiful gift. And I've also realized that I'm not only, when I set an intention to deliver a Yoga Nidra for someone, I've also realized that I'm also delivering it for myself. Anytime you deliver a yoga practice or a Yoga Nidra, whatever it may be, it's also for you, right? So it's a gift that keeps on giving, is how I like it. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. When you're giving a Yoga Nidra, you're receiving a Yoga Nidra. And that's really how you know that you're transmitting in Yoga Nidra, because you feel it. You feel it energetically through your whole body. And I think it was Eckhart Tolle said, you cannot not teach presence when you live in presence. So when we stay connected to that source energy within, that is what's transmitted. It's not looking outside of ourselves going, oh, are they getting it? Are they breathing okay? It's like, no, go in here. Yeah. And if you feel it, you cannot not be transmitting it.
That's a great way to look at it. It's oftentimes that I feel most connected when I'm teaching is that very thing. The deeper you work in to work out, right? So the deeper that you can work in, the more that the spirit, God, whatever you want to look at it is then feeding through you. You're just simply an antenna, like catching the waves and then delivering them back out.
Yeah.
So Patrick, there's the magic for you, man, right there.
Well said.
There's a difference in the way your mind responds to Yoga Nidra, right? So I think that brainwave dialing down is an interesting, a really interesting way to visualize Yoga Nidra, or changing down, I guess was probably a better way to describe it. Where the challenge within deepening your Yoga Nidra practice is actually maintaining some level of consciousness, right? Like I always like to maintain, I always maintain one pinky that I don't let completely go away. And that prevents me from ever being in a sleep state. And I know everyone's like, you can go to sleep, but I like to maintain some level of consciousness. And when we are, but the experience, maybe I'm wrong with this. Maybe you guys can tell me this is a different experience for you, but the experience for me is never a total dissolvement into oneness with the universe in the way I think of meditation being. But there is a certain level of dissolvement of the physical body that happens in Yoga Nidra. I think that Yoga Nidra is very good at dissolving sensation within the physical body. Is there is there an inherent challenge in the depth of the Yoga Nidra practice in that you do have to maintain, or I have to maintain, some level of some semblance of me still existing? I can't completely dissolve in Yoga Nidra because when I do, I lose consciousness.
So I know what you mean. And I think, we definitely from a teaching perspective tell the students that, use the tools and the techniques of the Yoga Nidra to drop beneath the mind. But you're right, over time, how can we maintain a level of awareness? But at that point, you're really resting as the witness to. So rather than an active participant, right? And the mind's like, oh, right thumb, left thumb, finger, elbow, shoulder. And it's like this active participant who's judging the experience and has all these thoughts about the experience. Really what you're doing is going beyond the mind and resting as the witness to the experience. And that's really powerful. And what that does is, again, build our capacity when we are out in the world of form, constantly changing all the fluctuations, is here I am embodied as Patrick or Laura or Brian, but I'm still connected to that aspect of witness that can recognize all the changing forms. And it allows me to be, in some situations, less reactive to, and rather more, like Brian said, I can move through life from a place of right action. It's not that I'm not going to still do things. So Yoga Nidra is really building capacity over time. So again, resting as the witness is different than staying tethered or connected to the mental fluctuations or activities of the mind. Do you feel a difference between the two?
Between meditation and Yoga Nidra?
A difference between I'm participating with all of the mental fluctuations, or I'm resting as a witness who is able to see all those fluctuations and they're not me.
Yeah, so I think that the way I describe that's the space between thought and reaction, right? Essentially, right? That is being in a meditative space. And I define that very differently than meditation. Meditation is a completely different practice. So Yoga Nidra as a meditative experience is a completely different statement than Yoga Nidra is a meditation. And to me, I think that's an interesting thing, because I do think consciously existing in a meditative space or in a meditative experience is something that we can do. And when it does happen, if it does happen, it's amazing. That experience of existing in a meditative space is an amazing experience. And I think that actually, I think you guys have dialed that in for me pretty perfectly, because I do think it is very, very meditative. And that experience of Yoga Nidra really is about, it is an interesting pathway. It really leads you down the sensation of releasing your mind to the experience that is happening and observing within you what is actually happening. And that's a pretty fascinating, it's a pretty fascinating step-by-step process to make happen.
And so, what's so cool is when you can rest as the witness, you know, when you're navigating some challenge of life. It's not separate from, it's not just, well, I've got to lay down and close my eyes and, you know, play this recording. It's not separate from, it's how can I also be a witness to, wow, I am having a giant reaction to this person who just cut me off in traffic. I can choose to continue to participate in this giant reaction, or I can choose to rest back with my breath or whatever tethering, you know, mechanism that we have that brings us back to the present moment. But it's through the practices. It's through the practice of Yoga Nidra. It's through the practice of meditation. It's even through the practice of asana and breath work that really give us those tools that, oh, I can be a witness to, rather than believing these reactions to be the totality of me.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you said earlier was that this Soham, or I am version of Yoga Nidra takes you beyond the edge of the diving board. And the edge of the diving board analogy is something that I use a very similar description of meditation, in that there's no way to step by step your way into infinity. There's no way to step by step your way into oneness, because you never will reach that number. But the diving board experience is just like completely letting go. So can you give me exactly what that means to you, and how the I am version of Yoga Nidra, it varies to offer that experience of complete immersion?
Yeah. Well, I AM Yoga Nidra stands for Integrative Amrit Method of Yoga Nidra. I am, from a yogic perspective, we know it to be, you know, so hum or hum so. And it's really I am, period, before all the labels are given to us. And for me, Yoga Nidra is leading us back to that knowing. It's leading us back to the I am before the label of Laura, mom, yoga teacher, friend, daughter, before all the labels that are given to us. And so the techniques of the I am method of Yoga Nidra are all guiding us to the space, the letting go. I really think you said it so beautifully. It is the letting go. It's the letting go of the labels, the letting go of the attachments. And look, that can be a scary thing. And I think it's why it's not always for every person every time, because it's like, I'll let go a little bit, but I'm going to still stay tethered to something, because it's what we identify with so clearly. And that's okay too. It's like Yoga Nidra, the practice of yoga, meets you where you are as you are. That's really, to me, the power of the practice. And so that end of the diving board, jumping off into the deep end, not the shallow end, we're not swimming in the shallow end, we're going to the deep end, is really about the true letting go. And that, you know, that's challenging. But what's beautiful about Yoga Nidra is it's a non-doing practice. In its nature is letting go. It's a non-doing practice. I don't even have to hold myself upright anymore. You know, in meditation, if we're upright, there's dealing with the sensations of the body, or working with or witnessing the sensations within the body. Yoga Nidra takes all of that out of it as well. It's a non-doing practice of letting go.
Okay, so this is the last question I have, but I wanted to save until the end, and I don't know how close we are to the end. We're pretty close, but since you brought this to the exact point where it has to be asked.
It has to be. Go ahead.
It's different, Brian. It's different.
Oh, damn it. Come on now.
What would you say to someone who says that yoga exists purely so that we can sit without feeling our body with our spine erect.
Yoga Nidra? Is
Yoga.
that what you mean? So ask me the question again. The practice of yoga?
So what would you say to someone? Yeah, what would you say to someone who says that yoga exists? Yoga in general, in all encapsulations, exists for the sole reason of allowing a physical being to sit in stillness with their spine erect.
That's interesting. I don't resonate with that at all. I feel like it's a trick question or something. So the sole purpose for all of the different schools, practices of yoga and beyond are to sit upright, feel the sensation of sitting upright. Oh, okay.
It's so the answer, so it's not a trick question, but it's completely about, so to me, yoga exists for one reason, and that is the reason. It's so that I can sit upright without feeling my spine, without feeling my body. Because if I am attached to my body in any way, I can never experience a true state of meditation. So if there's any sensation that I am feeling, I am tethered to this being that I exist in, and I can never transcend that being. So to me, when I look at, if I go back in the lineage of yoga 5,000-10,000 years ago to Adi Yogi, Adi Yogi's practice was essentially sitting, period, right? The original yogi, Shiva, did one thing, he sat. Yes. And that is how the practice of yoga was birthed. So when I look at the pure distillment of where this practice came from, it came from one thing, and it came from the ability to sit. And I see, easy pose is one of the most fundamental oxymorons in the practice of yoga, because you see the pain and anguish on people trying to sit with their legs closed and their spine erect. And it's perfect. Like a yoga teacher training is a beautiful way, right? Like, where's the wall? Because everybody has to put their spine up against the wall, because sitting for 3 hours with your spine erect is amazingly painful for 99.99999% of the people on the planet. So I used to ask the question that Brian thought was going to be, which was, what's the difference between meditation and thinking with your eyes closed? But I think a lot of it is how deeply you can tune your antenna, the spinal column as the antenna to the universe, without experiencing any sensation at all within the body. So that's my long explanation that I've never offered to the world. But I
needed more. Yeah, I needed a little bit more to that. But I think that's interesting. I agree with you. All yoga started, as seated meditation, 12, 14, 16 hours a day. And, we're, as householders, for me, I will just say this, that feels more like a Vedanta practice, where I am separating myself from everything in form, including this body, in order to connect to something greater. And to me, that's why Tantra came. Not Tantra as the West knows it as sex, but Tantra came as using everything in the world of form as a connection to source. There's no separation from this computer to this scarf to this window to this body. Everything in the world of form is coming from the same ocean, is coming from the same source. And so we can use all of it to connect back to, rather than trying to get away from. So for me, sensation, that source energy felt along the spinal column, but throughout the body, is a gateway back, or reveals the connection to the source nature that we truly are. Divinity and humanity coexisting all the time. So that's sort of my experience, or my understanding. I think it's a great question, and definitely interesting. And I like to, I appreciate that. And I think that, again, we all have, we all are taking these practices and these teachings and integrating them in different ways as well, which is so powerful about the practice too.
It's so interesting to hear both you all's take on that. It's because I have a totally different experience, and that's part of it. You know, that's part of the beauty of yoga. It's part of the beauty of this existence. It's part of the beauty of just being a human being. You know, that we're all having our own very unique, simultaneously different experience. It's super rad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to leave you with this, Laura. I got to ask this question. Patrick thought this was a good question last podcast, so I'm going to ask it again. Gosh darn it. So, in your life, we'll leave it on this one because I know we're butting up against time. But in your life, what has been more impactful for you? The things you have said yes to, or the things you have said no to?
For me personally, the things I have said yes to, because I spent a very large portion of my life, I think, in a place of fear. Fear of being seen, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of being the wrong thing, a lot of fear. And once I started saying yes, there was an opening up or a freedom inside that I didn't quite, maybe I forgot existed, is probably the truest statement to that. Just sort of forgot what it feels like to be free. And so for me, definitely saying yes.
I'm glad you said yes to this podcast.
Yeah.
I'm so glad too. See?
Yeah. Thank you. I feel like we could go on for hours. So I really appreciate you allowing us to carve out an hour of your time to make this happen. This has been really fun.
Oh, it was such a pleasure. I can't believe it's already been an hour. That went by really fast. I feel like we have to keep going.
Yeah. We're gonna have to have you come back.
Patrick.
Yeah, we'll have to have you come back. That'll be fun for sure.
Oh, I would love that.
I just have to say this. It's been, you're one of the brightest lights in my life, Laura. I think about you daily. I have my quotes right over it's going to be your right side. That's the little Laura-isms right there on that little that circle right next to the heart there, if you can see that. But those are the Laura-isms that I printed out that I took notes of during the YTT 200. And every time I teach in mandala. So where you hold your trainings, I can feel you in those classrooms. And I just love you, Laura, so deeply. So thank you for being you, and thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Brian. That's so sweet. And I feel exactly the same. And I teach on Mondays in mandala too. So
that's it.
I know. Energetically linked. I'm just super grateful for you. I'm so happy to see all the amazing things that you're sharing. And it's exciting. It's exciting to watch. And you have always been like walking sunshine. Not that you don't have your bad days, but you are just joy filled. And I'm grateful that you're in the world. And I just get to watch from afar your journey. Oh, thank you, my dear friend.
Thank you, my dear friend. I love you so much.
I love you too.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, Patrick. I love you too.
Love you too. Appreciate you guys so much.
Have a great day, Miss Laura. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks for having me on.
Thank you.